I'm Dan, and welcome to This Week in WWE. Yeah, okay, about that. So, long story short, I recorded the show on Saturday evening after the England game, with full intentions of uploading the video Sunday afternoon, but watching the video back, I wasn't happy with the quality of the video, so I decided to re-record everything on Monday to ensure that I put out the best possible version of this video. I am very sorry it's taken so much longer than it should have taken, but to make up for it, I should have a couple of new videos coming out for you on my channel this week, as well as the next episode of This Week in WWE. Anyways, this is the weekly show on my channel which talks about the latest goings on in WWE, as well as reviewing the week's wrestling news. Now, as always, please be advised that this video will contain spoilers from this week's wrestling in WWE, so if you do hear any spoilers in this video, please do not direct any blame towards me. So without further ado, let's get into the WWE view. So Raw opens with the announcement of the fantastically original and never seen before match, pitting the Revival against Roman Reigns and Bobby Lashley. Cool! I've never seen that match before, WWE. Where did you get that idea from? Reigns opened the show by talking about his defeat last week, saying he doesn't have any excuses for losing before using Bobby Lashley as his excuse for not winning. Yeah, that makes loads of sense, Roman. He's then interrupted by Ziggler and Drew, who promptly beat down Reigns before Seth makes the save. Reigns and Rollins, who are very annoyed at what happened, demanded a match against Ziggler and Drew a little bit later on in the show, despite Reigns being scheduled in his first time ever match against the Revival. Whilst he's talking to Seth backstage, they're both interrupted by Bobby Lashley, who will be teaming with Reigns later on in the evening, and he criticises Reigns for taking on 2 matches in one night, before telling him that apart from your brother Seth, no one likes you. In fairness to Lashley, considering the crowd reaction he gets week in and week out, he hasn't exactly lied there. Yep, I can see exactly what Bobby means there. Anyway, Roman, who was clearly very annoyed at what he said, told Lashley he was just starting the match and finishing the match, and all he had to do is stand on that apron with his phony smile and pick up that W. And in fairness, that is kind of what Roman got, but we'll get to that in a little bit. But before then was Roman's first match of the evening with Seth against Drew and Ziggler. I loved this match, in fairness. It had an old school tag match kind of vibe about it, lots of hot tags for Seth. It was a very fun match to watch, including possibly my favourite ever dueling chant of all time.
Get back to a vertical base and somehow break this hold. Fired up crowd here tonight.
As I said earlier, Roman continues to be a hit with the WWE Universe. And talking of hits, the match was later interrupted by the Revival, who come out and attacked Reigns ahead of their match later on in the evening, causing Dolph and Drew to be DQ'd. Whilst the Revival are attacking Roman Reigns, Dolph and Drew are attacking Rollins, hitting him with the zigzag and Claymore combination. That move really needs a name. The Clayzag? The Zigmore? Any suggestions, anyone? Later that evening, Reigns makes his way down to the ring, this time being followed closely behind by Bobby Lashley, who has now got new graphics and remixed music, and they're obviously competing in a never seen before match against the Revival. Roman was set on doing what he told Lashley he was going to do earlier on. He was starting the match and he was ending the match, whether Bobby Lashley liked it or not. Reigns had many opportunities to tag Lashley in, including Lashley taking out both members of the Revival to create a clear-cut opportunity for Roman to make the tag, but Reigns chooses not to make the tag, trying to prove a point to Lashley, and this backfired on Reigns ultimately as the Revival savagely attacked Reigns, leading to them being DQ'd. And as the beatdown continued, did Lashley come to Reigns' aid? No. He walks away, leaving the Revival to hit a shatter machine on Reigns in the middle of the ring. This led to a match being made for Extreme Rules between Bobby Lashley and Roman Reigns, which should be an interesting match to watch, but in honesty I don't think the crowd will be too interested if Roman's previous pay-per-view match is anything to go by. Elsewhere on Raw, Bayley and Sasha went to counselling, and in honesty the segments were incredibly bizarre. It's one thing arguing about having a counselling meeting in the same room at the same time, but doing that over the top of elevator music is completely and utterly bizarre. The important thing to note from this segment is that Dr. Shelby is back, and he's not been seen on WWE since the days of Team Hell No, going back about 5 years ago I reckon now. He sits both Sasha and Bayley down and tries to get to the bottom of their issues, even getting both of them to mock each other in front of their faces, which turns into another argument. And I should point out at this point that the elevator music was still playing. There's about 3 or 4 different segments, and in every single one of them they had the same elevator music playing in the background. It's weird. It was a weird segment, and after a very strong bit of storytelling last week, it totally lost me some confidence in where this feud actually goes in the future, unfortunately. Elsewhere on the show, the Authors of Pain defeated Titus Worldwide. The Riot Squad continued to attack defenceless objects backstage for reasons completely unknown to anyone, not even themselves I don't think. Ember Moon defeats Liv Morgan of the Riot Squad, who is missing their leader Ruby Riot, which we'll get to later on. Constable Corbin demands an apology from Finn Balor, who refused an apology and continued to rip Corbin about looking like a waiter in TGI Fridays. Nia Jax defeated Mickie James with Natalya and Alexa Bliss both ringside. The Raw Women's Championship match at Extreme Rules is now announced to be an Extreme Rules match, with Ronda Rousey vowing to be sitting front row for the fight. And Mojo Rawley says no way to a rematch with Jose before assaulting him and a member of the Conga Line for absolutely no reason whatsoever. Elsewhere in the night, Kevin Owens arrived at the arena and tried his best to hide his car away from Braun Strowman after last week he stole his keys and flipped it, choosing it to park it next to a Portaloo Inn, which was quite frankly a shit place to hide a massive car. Owens tries to convince Angle to do something about Strowman, trying to get him suspended, and Angle responds by putting Owens in a match with him a little bit later on in the evening, which KO tries to get out of and get it cancelled by attempting to bribe Angle, saying he was going to tidy his office or whatever, but Angle wasn't having any of it. That match was the main event of the show, and after just one lockup which KO loses convincingly, he decides he doesn't want to face Strowman and instead chooses to run away to safety. However, hot on his heels was a very angry Braun Strowman, so KO didn't have anywhere to hide. In his haste to escape the arena, he forgets his car keys, and with Braun quickly hunting him down, KO chooses not to go back inside to grab his keys, but chooses to hide inside the Portaloo. This also turns out to be a shit idea, as Strowman proceeds to tape up the Portaloo and drag it back onto the stage before pushing it off the stage, with KO still trapped inside it. Strowman wins via count out, and KO, who tried to hide away from Strowman, is driven off the stage inside a Portaloo with a run-in shoulder tackle to end what was a fairly good show. In honesty, it wasn't as strong as the previous week's show in my opinion, but it was very entertaining nonetheless. Mojo Rawley has got new entrance music, which is very good because his previous music was horrific, and it was announced that the Intercontinental Championship match at Extreme Rules between Seth Rollins and Dolph Ziggler will now be a 30-minute Iron Man match, which is good, but also a little bit disappointing at the same time, because I feel that they could have easily made this a 45-60 minute match and people would have been thoroughly entertained throughout. I think they've bottled it in that sense. They want to cram more into that show but still have that as a gimmicky kind of match. 30 minutes also is their kind of standard running time for their matches in recent weeks, so it doesn't really make that much of a difference in honesty, apart from the fact that it is a 30-minute match. Other than that, it was a very good show and I did enjoy it. It was a really fun, entertaining show. Moving on to SmackDown Live now, and Jeff Hardy issued yet another open challenge for the US title in an Independence Day US Open Challenge. Before his match, Jeff appeared in yet another Woken-esque promo, paying tribute to Independence Day, even though it was a day early, but I think we'll let WWE off on this one. Accepting the challenge this week was none other than The Miz, and the pair put on a very good opening match, which was eventually won by Jeff Hardy, following a disagreement between the referee and The Miz, which led to a twist of fate and swanton bomb by Jeff Hardy. A few very quick points from this match. Commentary were hyping up the idea of open challenges since Seth Rollins lost his title a couple of weeks back to Dolph Ziggler in one, and in fairness I don't blame him, because it does create a bit of hype about that match. Jeff Hardy will be facing Shinsuke Nakamura at Extreme Rules, who is still recovering from being bitten by a sniffer dog last week. The match was originally scheduled to take place on last week's SmackDown Live, but he was obviously injured and couldn't compete. Jeff Hardy was orchestrating delete chants, which could further indicate that he could be on the verge of becoming Woken in the very near future. And the phrase Mizdependence Day, made from the commentary desk, needs to get in the bin with immediate effect. It's just cringeworthy in my opinion. Talking of cringeworthy, next up is the 3rd of July pancake eating contest. No, seriously, this actually happened. I had to watch it a few times because I genuinely thought I was seeing things. The pancake eating contest of course featured the New Day. I mean, who else was it going to be really, and it was hosted by Byron Saxton, who got the opportunity to not only sound like an idiot but also look like one too, with a ridiculous hat and suit combo. But on a serious note, on a serious level, who wrote Byron Saxton's lines during that segment, and why haven't they been fired yet? The pancakes were coloured red, white and blue because what else did you expect on Independence Day? Apparently the record for eating pancakes is 113 pancakes in under 8 minutes. Now I would research that to see if that is actually true, but in honesty, not only was I still in a little bit of shock that there's an actual record for pancakes eaten in under 8 minutes, but I had also completely given up on watching this bizarre segment by that time. Thankfully, the contest is broken up after about 5-10 seconds by Sanity, who stormed the ring and saved the whole segment from being completely and utterly bizarre, beating down a New Day from behind before Eric Young put Xavier Woods through a table. It was a good ending to a poor segment, which was then ruined by commentary again, who ended it on, Xavier Woods just got pancaked by the hands of Sanity. That can get in the bin right now also. It was an odd segment which I really wish I could erase from my memory. Right, let's move on from that bizarre segment to something better. Next up is Asuka versus James Ellsworth, for fuck's sake. The last time Ellsworth faced a female wrestler in WWE, he was beaten down by literally everyone on the roster. So this was bound to go down extremely well for Ellsworth. Did they think that we were going to forget about this? James Ellsworth in a backstage promo claims that nobody is ready for Ellsworth. Yep, nobody except for Braun Strowman, Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, Randy Orton, AJ Styles, John Cena, Nikki Bella, Charlotte Flair, Naomi and Becky fucking Lynch. I think he's hit his head a few times during them beatings because he's clearly become very delusional. The match begins, and in classic Ellsworth fashion he does his best to delay the match by doing stretches and push-ups before the match, but eventually when it does get underway it's over in fairly quick fashion, but for very different reasons. The only real bit of offence in the match was Asuka hitting a very hard slap to Ellsworth before following it up with a spinning back fist, which Ellsworth totally forgets to sell for a few seconds. Ellsworth chooses then to run away from Asuka, who chased him out of the arena through the crowd, leading to a double count out. Eventually he's lured Asuka back to the ring again, who is then attacked by Carmella. Backstage, and Paige makes a rematch for next week against Asuka and makes it a lumberjack match. Elsewhere on SmackDown this week, Becky Lynch beat Peyton Royce of the Iconics with the Disarmer in a fairly predictable but entertaining match, and Aiden English was defeated by AJ Styles, who was attacked by Rusev post-match. Now, Rusev is still being treated like a heel by WWE, despite being the literal definition of over with the WWE universe right now, and it's frustrating me in honesty. I don't see WWE's obsession with the heel versus face rivalries. Even at WrestleMania they couldn't just have AJ Styles versus Shinsuke Nakamura without having Shinsuke turn heel on AJ Styles at the end. Now I know that Nakamura turning heel actually turned out to be one of the best things that's ever happened to his character in WWE, but that's another story for another time. The main event of the show was one that was set up from earlier in the evening, as Daniel Bryan and Kane opened the show with an in-ring promo with Renee Young. Now, just as we thought that Team Hell No had put their differences behind them, Daniel Bryan brought up the fact that Kane tried to end his career not too long ago, whilst Kane was part of the Authority angle, tombstoning him and chokeslamming Bryan in the ring, on the floor at ringside, on the steel steps and through an announcer's table, not forgetting abducting his now wife Brie Bella. Kane wants to put the past in the past, but Bryan wasn't having any of it until he had heard an apology from Kane. They were interrupted by the Usos, who weren't happy by the fact that Team Hell No had just got an opportunity at the tag team titles just for hugging last week. They're interrupted by SmackDown GM Paige, who makes the main event match for them later on in the evening, adding that if the Usos beat Team Hell No, then they get added to the Extreme Rules match. It was a fairly fun and exciting match. It was the first time that in 5 years that Team Hell No had tagged with each other, and it was an entertaining match, which eventually and unsurprisingly I think was won by Team Hell No. The Usos continue to be fantastic, and I would love to see them going after the Tag Team Championships again very soon. They are great performers to watch in the ring, and Daniel Bryan and Kane were especially entertaining to watch as well. With Raw and SmackDown Live now reviewed, it's time to move on to the latest news and bizarre goings on in the wacky world of WWE, in what is personally my favourite segment of the show. It's time for... There are a few moments from this week's show that I want to start with, and I'll try and get them out of the way first. Firstly, I want to go back to Raw this week and talk about Corey Graves, who during the Revival vs Reigns and Lashley match stated that Revival don't have a tag match at Extreme Rules, so they went after another big tag team. Once again, Corey, that is total and utter b***. Anyone who watched that match, regardless of whether or not they were a wrestling fan or not, could tell that Reigns and Lashley do not like each other. Corey, man, I'm disappointed in you. For a very, very long time, I would have said that you was one of the best all-round commentators on WWE, but in recent weeks, some of the stuff you've said has made you look totally ridiculous. With last week's claim that if you blend pancakes to become batter again being the most bizarre. No, I am not over that yet. At one point during SmackDown Live, Kane trended on Twitter, and Daniel Bryan didn't. One of them is the most talented wrestlers in the WWE to this date, and the other one's Kane. I've no words. I've absolutely no words for that, in honesty. I spotted a fantastic sign in the front few rows of SmackDown which read, "I attend more WWE events than Brock Lesnar." And the sad truth here is that he's absolutely not lied at all, and he has got a very, very fair enough point. And on that subject, just as a quick reminder, it's been exactly 73 days since the Universal Champion was seen on WWE programming, and exactly 73 days since the Universal Championship was defended in WWE. Tune in next week for more updates on what has arguably been the most forgettable championship reign in WWE history. On the subject of Brock Lesnar, over the weekend he was called out by the new UFC heavyweight champion Daniel Cormier. Lesnar, who was cage-side for the fight at UFC 226, joined the champion in the octagon before shoving the new champion across the cage and cutting a promo on him. It's very much had a WWE-esque feel to it, but with more free range to do or say whatever they wanted, which you obviously, and somewhat frustratingly, you can't do in the WWE. Dana White did confirm that Lesnar is free and clear to fight in UFC as part of his WWE deal, stating that Lesnar has a very good relationship with Vince McMahon, so there's no worries there. This does throw the idea of the Universal Championship into disrepute, as Brock was due to defend it at SummerSlam. However, due to his USADA suspension, he may not be allowed to fight in UFC until January 2019, so we could still potentially see a Universal Championship match at SummerSlam, but in current form, I'm not holding my breath. WWE have announced that NXT TakeOver will be pushed back an hour, starting 1 hour earlier, starting with TakeOver Brooklyn 4 next month. This is rumoured not to extend TakeOver shows per se, but more to allow them the flexibility to overrun a show should they deem it to be appropriate. Matches like Ciampa and Gargano at the previous NXT TakeOver could have gone on for longer if they were allowed time to do so, but time restricted them down. By moving NXT TakeOver back 1 hour, it will allow them kind of matches to overrun if they need to do so in the future. By the way, whilst I'm on the subject of Ciampa and Gargano, if you haven't seen their match from NXT TakeOver yet, go and give it a watch. It's brutal but brilliant at the same time, and it's my must-see of the week. As I said earlier, Shinsuke Nakamura is set to make his return from his freak injury ahead of last week's SmackDown Live show. He is scheduled to face Jeff Hardy for the United States Championship at Extreme Rules, a match which, in fairness, was always worthy of being on a pay-per-view in the first place. Let's just hope that the sniffer dogs are kept well away from Shinsuke to avoid any more freak injuries. On the subject of injuries, it seems like everyone's picking up little minor injuries lately. Firstly, Bray Wyatt was out of action this week on Raw, as over the weekend prior to Raw, he'd been involved in a car crash. Thankfully, his injury doesn't seem to be too serious, and he will be checked out by doctors this week to ensure that he is able to compete at Extreme Rules against the B Team. On a similar note, Ruby Riott was out of action this week following an injury sustained during a live event over the weekend. It's been reported in Wrestling Observer that she was taken for an MRI scan which revealed that she'd sustained a sprained MCL. She's scheduled to be re-evaluated at the end of July, but is not expected to spend too much time on the sidelines. Finally, in injury news, Oney Lorcan suffered a broken orbital bone during his match at NXT TakeOver Chicago against the Undisputed Era and will be out of action for 3 weeks. And finally, another moan at Corey Graves, this time a quote from the main event of SmackDown Live about Team Hell No, which really wound me up. Corey Graves stated that Daniel Bryan has just recently returned to the ring after 3 years off. When was the last time Kane competed? There's an element of ring rust for both superstars. Okay, fair enough point about Kane, who's been missing now for a fair while, but I'm absolutely not having that about Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan has literally competed in the ring at 3 pay-per-views, in pretty much most SmackDown Live and house shows, or live events, whatever you want to call them. He made his return in April at WrestleMania in a tag match, not to mention that he literally survived over 70 minutes in the greatest Royal Rumble about 3 weeks after Mania, and only 2 weeks ago did he defeat Big E and Samoa Joe in a gauntlet match before being attacked by the Bludgeon Brothers and eliminated by The Miz. Yes, he's recently returned from an injury that's nearly cost him his career. However, the literal definition of ring rust is detriment to wrestling ability resulting from lack of practice during a leave of absence, which, as you can clearly see, is quite literally the opposite in this situation, as Daniel Bryan has now been operating on pretty much a full schedule since WrestleMania back at the beginning of April. As a tag team, I can completely see your point, because Kane and Bryan haven't tagged for 5 damn years, but to suggest that Daniel Bryan, who has been in active competition for the best part of 3 months now since returning, could have an element of ring rust about him is totally ridiculous, and I couldn't just let that one slide, Corey. Please do your damn research. And finally, if you have spotted something bizarre in a WWE show that I might have missed, then please send it to me either in the comments section below or by tweeting it to me. A link to my Twitter can be found in the description below. And that is it for this week last week in WWE. Apologies again, it is so late out. I will do my absolute best to make sure that next week's episode is up a lot quicker than this week's show. I'm currently away, most likely as you're watching this video, but I am keeping up to date with WWE where possible, so that I can bring you the latest news in all things WWE. I do have a few gaming videos which should be going live during the week as well, so be sure to look out for that also. And as always, if you've enjoyed this video, please give it a like below, it helps me out a lot. Share this video with others who may enjoy it, subscribe to my channel and click on that notification bell for the absolute latest videos from my channel, as and when they are uploaded. And I will see you in next week's episode, but until then, I'll see you later.